Welcome back to Cycle Wisdom, where we empower women to restore natural menstrual cycles to improve health and promote fertility. I'm your host, Dr. Monica Minger, and I'm so glad you're listening today. On today's episode, I am super excited to be interviewing Victoria Peck-Gray. She is a functional medicine dietitian and the owner of Wonderfully Made Nutrition, which is a functional nutrition coaching business where she helps women overcome resistant weight loss, balancing hormones, and restoring gut health by addressing underlying root causes through a functional medicine approach. She does this by personalized nutrition advice, advanced lab testing, supportive lifestyle therapies, and targeted supplementation. Victoria wholeheartedly believes that our bodies are incredible creations, wonderfully made with potential to function at optimum when we nourish them the way they were designed to be. This is a two-part episode, so enjoy this enlightening conversation today and make sure to tune in again next week to hear part 2 of our discussion as well. Welcome to the show, Victoria. I'm so glad to have you here today.
Thank you for having me here.
Today, we're going to talk about nutrition in regards to fertility, but also nutrition for PCOS. And a lot of it, again, there's some overlap, but tell me a little bit about kind of the framework that you use when you address nutrition in regards to women's health concerns.
Yeah, well, so it's a big topic. And I think that I like to really help my clients understand actually what is going on in their body instead of just being like, okay, we're going to, get started with a dietary plan. It's like, I really want them to understand how nutrition even plays a role, kind of like the mechanisms underlying all of it. So like how that plays a role in supporting hormone balance, right? And in my experience, I have seen that it almost all comes back down to 3 major areas of concern that have to do with nutrition. And I find that to be blood sugar imbalances, inflammation, and nutrient deficiencies. And I think a lot of things can kind of boil back down to those different things. So I think for each woman, understanding first the context of their life, where are they coming from? Like, what is their actual history coming into this? Because a lot of times women will come to me and they're actually already trying to eat healthier now. They've made some changes. I don't think I get anyone who's like, oh, I'm just decided maybe I'll make a few changes now. It's like they're kind of already trying because they've already noticed they've had some issues in their hormones, whether it's they're trying to conceive or they're looking to do that in the future, but they've gotten this diagnosis of PCOS and they know that that could cause some challenges with that process. So with hormone balance, we really have to understand that there's multifactorial. Obviously, there's other medical issues going on too that need to be addressed. So from a nutrition standpoint, you have to understand that context of what has happened in their past history that could be contributing to some of these nutritional issues now, particularly blood sugar imbalances. So I'll go over just a couple things here with what I see from people's history that's really common patterns. And then I can talk about a framework to actually address these things too. But blood sugar balances in particular, I find that a lot of women don't realize that they might have blood sugar issues going on because maybe they go and they get their blood work done and they just get their fasting blood sugar taken and it looks just fine. Or it's in the normal range, but maybe it's on the higher end of that range, but it's still quote unquote normal. However, they could still be having other ups and downs of their blood sugar kind of all day long. And this can be happening for many, many years without having the diagnosis of prediabetes or diabetes. There could be insulin resistance kind of rising over time, and that could be contributing to some things. The reason why that's so problematic is that insulin resistance, that is actually a hormone, that's a resistance to the hormone insulin, right? So if we have that going on, that is actually going to contribute to issues at the level of the ovary, issues at the level of really any cells in the body too, because all of our cells are trying to accept sugar from the blood. And if there's insulin resistance going on, it's going to be happening all across the body. And it's not just that that's an isolated problem either. It typically means that the process that happened in the body to even get to the point that we became insulin resistant means we're probably also having other issues at the cellular level, right? There's probably inflammation that has been occurring to even contribute to that insulin resistance. There might be nutrient deficiencies also that might be contributing to that as well, because we need enough nutrients to allow our cells to bring things in and take them out as well. So as I mentioned, blood sugar imbalances, inflammation, nutrient deficiencies, you start to see that those are actually all kind of interconnected. It's kind of like the chicken or the egg. One of them started the process and it kind of fed into the other ones, or vice versa. Are they all happening together? So I think understanding that things have probably been accumulating for a while. And I don't think that that should make women afraid or ashamed of what's been going on in the past. We want to get real clear on where we're at now. Because I think a lot of women find themselves in this moment being totally confused, feeling very blindsided by their health, feeling like just kind of just happened to me all of a sudden. Like I had no idea that this was going on. Another thing though too is if someone hasn't been eating really well balanced for a while, at least in the past, maybe they're doing better now. However, we have to understand that that past context is probably affecting us now, because what I often see with a lot of women is they might have had a past history of maybe it's been disordered eating or just not eating fantastically in the past, maybe not getting enough protein, not getting enough nutrient dense foods. And then maybe they also have a past history of really strong chronic stress. This is unfortunately really common. And, I think everyone kind of can say, oh, everyone's stressed out. We all have stress, but oftentimes we can see that this chronic stress history has taken a toll on the body. It has caused cortisol imbalances, which can feed into blood sugar imbalances. Stress definitely depletes more nutrients in our body. We have to use up more nutrients. There's also a lot of changes that happen there. So the nutrient deficiencies are happening, blood sugar imbalances. And then eventually, chronic stress at a chronic level can actually lead to more inflammation. So again, that history there has really led up to this point. And even if someone has like, oh, well, that was because I had a really crazy job 2 years ago and I'm not in that job anymore. That's great. I think that's a really great step to get out of something and to try to put the origin of that stressor behind us. But now we have to make up for what has happened before, repleting the body, really restoring it back to optimal function. I look at a lot about context in people's health history. So I think it matters a lot and it really impacts what they're doing now.
So follow-up question on that with stress, because I think that's really vital, is that I think so many women say, well, I'm not under stress now, but it was, something in my past. What if when they were going through that stressful event, if they were still eating really healthy at that time, if their nutrition was good, does that make any difference as to whether or not that stress impacted them? Or is the stress completely independent of the dietary choices that were being made during that stressful event?
Yeah, I would say that it probably depends, and it can go both ways. I think if there's really strong stress, there are some things that, the way that stress impacts the body, like stomach acid production is going to take a hit. We're not going to produce as much stomach acid. Why does that matter? Like, well, that's like the first domino of our whole digestion cascade. So that could even impact gut health and then nutrient absorption and a whole slew of gut health issues potentially. Even if they were still eating a really great amount of protein, for example, but they're really stressed, it's like they might not even have enough digestion ability to digest that. So I think that stress, if it's really prolonged and heightened, can override even a pretty good balanced diet. But then I think also too, I want to look back and say, okay, well, what is balanced? I think that also is another confusing point for a lot of people too. What does a balanced diet really look like? And, for some, they might think it's not having a lot of fried foods or, desserts or something like that. However, it's not just about what are we not getting, but also are we getting enough of the good stuff? Are we really getting enough antioxidants, for example? How do we know if we're getting those? Have we been actually eating enough protein that's really sufficient, not just meeting the bare minimum, but even enough? So yeah, I think it really depends. I would typically find that, especially when someone is undergoing stress in the past, unless they were uber intentional about it, I think that typically during a stressful time, nutrition takes a hit too, because of just the lifestyle and behavioral changes that are going on during that time too.
Yeah. For most women, I think there are some stressful events in our lifetime that we can probably look back and, it may not be always that emotional stress, right? Sometimes we have physical stressors, whether that's a pregnancy, whether that's an injury, a significant illness. And so remembering that stress can be all or any of those things. And so stress looks different for everyone. As you look to try and help start to address some of those foundational issues and try and kind of back up with correcting the stress and the underlying imbalances that are going on, what are some of the needs that people have in order to really be successful with helping to restore and kind of balance their hormones when it comes to their nutritional health?
I think it's having a framework in mind to know what is the roadmap ahead. It's so important because I think, again, we have to really help women get clear on what's going on, because I think they come in with so much confusion, so much distress about this. I like to tell my clients, like, typically I find that there's 3 major categories of needs that we have here. Number one is having the right knowledge. So everything I talked about before, just understanding what has been going on, right? So maybe getting into a little bit of the science with them as much as they want to know. But even just knowing that, like, hey, blood sugar imbalances might be going on. Inflammation, what are the signs or symptoms or even lab markers that are showing up and giving us evidence of these things? are there nutrient deficiencies? Again, are we doing micronutrient testing for that? Or am I doing a really good assessment of their current dietary intake, or just kind of inferring from their past too? So again, getting the context, kind of getting the right knowledge and understanding now, it's really helpful. I think it's really empowering for women. A lot of times people say, I just want you to tell me what to do. It's like, yes, I would love to support you in that, but I also want you to understand what's going on. So the right knowledge is a really good first need. Then the second step, though, I would say is, okay, now that we understand what is going on, how are we going to make changes? How are we actually going to practically do this? And that's when it comes to thinking about how are we going to make this realistic for someone? How is it going to be feasible for them? What are the challenges that might come up during the implementation time of making changes? And that's understanding what else is going on in our lifestyle. What is our schedule like? Have we made space in our schedule to prioritize these things? I work with so many women, and we're going super deep. We might do functional lab testing. We might do all this kind of cool stuff. But when it comes to then putting a protocol in place, sometimes they're not spending enough time in the week actually meal planning or preparing meals. So we have to really kind of get nitty gritty on like, how can we make that work? How can we find that space in your schedules? So I think really lifestyle adjustments is actually probably a huge piece there. And then I would say the third need I'd like to tell my clients, especially if we're talking about their stress history in our first call, it's like, okay, well, that feels like Pandora's box to kind of open up the whole stress thing. Like, how do I start to mitigate or manage my stress? It's like, that's typically not the lowest hanging fruit for I think a lot of my clients. Typically, we go into more of the nutrition side of things first. But we do have to understand that, like, at some point, the mental, emotional, spiritual side of things, that might need to be also addressed. But as you mentioned, though, stress is not always just the mental, emotional, or spiritual issues going on. It could be literally someone was over-exercising for years, and that could be a real physical stress around their body. However, for some women, if, the mental, emotional side of things is leading to some challenges for them, and maybe it's just because they've struggled physically for so long that has actually caused a lot of mental heartache there for them, or emotional heartaches. They just don't know what to do. So I think that area is a need that does need to eventually be addressed, and every woman is going to need to kind of tackle that in their own way. I sometimes support my clients in that. I think it's just pointing out to my clients more so that there's a really holistic picture that we want to understand here when it comes to their health, and understanding that it's going to be multifactorial, especially if they're coming to me for nutrition. Maybe they might have this vision of like, oh, I just need to be given a dietary protocol. It's like, well, there's so much more that we actually need to explore here that might be impacting you. And it's really great though, because it also gives us so much runway for things that we can do to support our health too. It doesn't just have to be like, oh, I just have to eat this one thing. It's like, no, actually, there's a lot of things we can do throughout the day that can actually support our health too. So I think it's a very hopeful perspective.
Yeah. And I love that. And that's part of the reason I wanted you on this podcast, was because I love how you look at that big picture. We do a lot of root cause analysis within our practice too. And, I always tell women, my goal is not just to help you to lose that 10 pounds and then dismiss you and see you later. Or if your intention is that you're trying to get pregnant, yes, we want to help you achieve that. But ultimately, the primary goal should be improving your long-term health, so that way, even long beyond when you have that pregnancy, when you've lost that 10 pounds, you're able to sustain that in a way that is meaningful and that helps you to feel more whole and feel like I can do this, I can sustain this, and I don't need to just be on XYZ medication, supplements, or whatever the rest of my life. Is that there's so much that we can change and adjust just from a lifestyle standpoint. So I love that you get to the root cause of that, which is so important. So talk to me a little bit about, you had mentioned earlier on when you're looking at hormone imbalances, you say it kind of comes down to blood sugar, inflammation, and nutrient deficiency. So tell me more about that, and why do you think that's the case? Why have you seen that, or maybe some practical examples of where you've seen that in your practice?
Sure. So some of the common issues maybe in terms of how someone is eating. A woman comes to me, they have PCOS potentially, and they're just really struggling with weight loss resistance, and their cycles are kind of out of whack, and they're really looking for support with nutrition. And they feel like their energy is really low. They have really strong cravings, and they just really feel like, I don't know what to do anymore. And maybe they've tried trying to eat less, trying to skip some meals here and there or something, and they're trying to reduce calories, and they really feel like there's nothing is budging in their health, even though they think that they're maybe doing some good things to support changing their diet. However, I like to look at that and say, okay, well, what are the core issues I often see when it comes to the way that someone's eating? Are we skipping meals? Are we actually not getting enough nutrients? I actually find a lot of women who are actually looking for weight loss and feel like it's been a real challenge for them. And I so often find that women are actually under eating still. Or maybe it's for under eating and overeating at different parts of the day. And it's just causing a real roller coaster of issues throughout the day, particularly with blood sugar. So I find that under eating can actually be a real issue for a lot of people. I will have people track sometimes and they'll be like, yeah, I'm eating 1,200 calories, but their body would really like to be eating maybe 15 to 1,600 at least. And they're still not losing weight, even on a calorie deficit. So it's like, okay, well, why I'm not creating weight loss? I thought calorie deficits support with weight loss. That's not always the case. So we have to understand, though, if we have nutrient deficiencies going on, we literally cannot properly metabolize foods. So that's going to be an issue. And then also blood sugar imbalance is a huge piece of that too. I'll go into that in a second. But even just on the nutrient deficiency side of things, someone's metabolic rate could be lower because I always would say, if your body is trying to meet you where you're at, if you're telling your body, this is all I'm going to be eating, and I'm not going to be giving you enough nutrients in the process, and sometimes some of the foods might be more inflammatory, or there might be a lack of anti-inflammatory foods. I like to think about that. Our body's just like, you know what, we're going to slow things down. And I would like to say, your body might turn down the dial 10, 20% across your entire body. That means reproduction, digestion, hair growth, whatever it might be. Everything just gets turned down a little bit. This is not a completely scientific way to talk about it, but it's a little bit more of a visual, and everything gets turned down a little bit. Our whole metabolic rate, everything starts to slow down a little bit. We have poor energy. Reproduction is not going to be as fantastic. We're going to have some gut symptoms going on, a little bit of everything going on here, and I don't know what to do. So when it comes to blood sugar imbalances, so often it's either under eating going on, but also the way that we're constructing our meals. I think that when women say, oh, well, I thought I was balancing my blood sugar because I was not having sugar and I was cutting out added sugar. That's not the only thing. If anything, we can actually have some added sugar and still balance our blood sugar. So like what really goes into constructing what is a really balanced meal? My approach is protein, fat, and fiber, and actually getting enough of those three components at a meal. And that can actually slow down that rise in blood sugar. So we have to really get the right context of foods at a meal. Basically, that's the first step I always go into with any of my clients, because again, so many people are looking to maybe try to go into something 2 steps down. I was like, no, we got to get back to that first foundation of, are you getting enough of these 3 core things that was going to cause stabilization of your blood sugar? Why do we want that? Well, that's going to help, again, with hormone balance. At least we're not causing undue burden in our body, because every time we spike our blood sugar, it's actually a little bit inflammatory, and that does cause some issues there. And we also want that blood sugar balance to support stable energy levels. This does support mood as well. And then it also gives us space throughout the day so that we don't feel like we're constantly having to eat every 2 hours, which is not actually that supportive for this process. So I actually don't recommend often like a really, really small frequent meals for most women. I actually recommend let's eat a really good amount that actually fills you up, actually stabilizes blood sugar, and gives you enough nutrients, to give you enough opportunity to get enough nutrients, and then have space between our meals so that we can actually go do other things, live our lives, and not have to be thinking about food and having a decision fatigue to open up the whole conversation of like, what am I going to eat again, right? So it's actually causing this proper meal spacing. So actually, and doing this process, it's my 4-method process. Step number 1 is getting enough protein, fat, fiber. And then step number 2, I just make sure we're getting enough of those. So actually really making sure we're dialing up as much as we can. And then those first 2 steps allow us to actually get that meal spacing. And then the 4th step is really working on kind of, are we getting enough of really good therapeutic foods? Are we getting enough nutrients within that process? You're kind of fine-tuning the process.
So for clients within our practice, if we're looking at blood sugar balance, because we realize this is a huge thing, not just for PCOS, not just for weight loss, but many of our clients, as they go through getting lab testing, we do a 2-hour glucose tolerance test. So they're come in fasting, they have a big old either sugary drink or sugar load of some sort. And then we check those levels over the next 2 hours. But the difference is that we are also checking insulin levels at each of those points along with it. And so that really helps us to pick up some of that insulin resistance even before that blood sugar is elevated. You know, I think one of the surprising things is that oftentimes people don't realize or don't know that they have blood sugar problems, don't have any signs of insulin resistance. So if somebody doesn't feel like they have any problems, what are the other symptoms or signs that they could be looking for that might indicate, hey, I have a problem with this, I should get evaluated? And then I think the other piece is for people that maybe aren't working with our clinic yet or who haven't had that type of test done, what is a good way to figure out, do I have insulin resistance? Do I have any blood sugar problems?
this is where we want to really look at how is someone feeling throughout the day. And if other signs that you could be having blood sugar swings throughout the day, whether or not they're crazy high levels or crazy lows, but there are ways we understand suboptimal symptoms that are going on here. And the caveat, though, I will say is that I think a lot of people just accept when they're not feeling great. One of the symptoms would be low energy levels. It's like, well, everyone's kind of running on E, right? We're all kind of running on low energy. We're all trying to get more, caffeine or something. Like everyone in their lives is doing that. Actually, that's not normal though. Like that's common, but not normal. So I would say that if you are struggling to actually keep really good energy levels throughout the day, and maybe despite getting, 7 up to 9 hours of sleep at night, that would be an issue. That would be a symptom of, hey, blood sugar might not be fantastic throughout the day. Again, because if we spike our blood sugar, oftentimes that's followed by a low in blood sugar. It might not be a critical low, that's an emergency, but it's low enough that, okay, what other symptom will that be causing? It's going to cause maybe some cravings. It's going to cause feeling irritable, feeling kind of agitated, and really just feeling like I really need to eat something, or maybe I need to go get another cup of coffee or something to just kind of give me that little perk, in between meals. So if we really feel like we need that pick me up in whatever way that is in between meals, typically a sign. Now, again, if someone's like, oh, I'm just only giving myself 5 hours sleep every night because I'm running a crazy schedule. All right, we have to think about that. That could definitely be causing some of the low energy, but that could also contribute. So actually, another thing that would be is if you're not giving yourself enough sleep, but just from your schedule, we know that one night of lack of sleep actually creates 67% of a change in insulin levels the next day, which is pretty incredible. And right now I have a 6-month-old, so I definitely had some lack of sleep in the last 6 months. But because of that, I know what could happen to blood sugar. I have been super diligent then with every day, really making sure I'm kind of getting ahead of the game with getting enough protein, fat, fiber at my meals, really making sure that I'm not having carbs on their own. So I'm not going to spike blood sugar by not having something else to kind of shield that blood sugar spike. So anyways, there's some symptoms. I would say even waking up at night, a lot of times between like 1 to 3 a.m. and kind of just waking up, feeling you have to go to the bathroom during that time, that typically is a sign that cortisol might be spiking at night. And there could be some issues. That's not always the case, but for a lot of people, I do find that that might be a symptom that's really common. So why would that be happening? If we are having blood sugar imbalances throughout the day, that does have an impact on our cortisol levels throughout the day too. And if you know about circadian rhythm, our circadian rhythm is just kind of like this cycle, like basically a body clock that we have. And it kind of impacts how everything cycles throughout the day. So maybe we have typically a peak energy mid-morning to midday, and then that circadian arc kind of naturally declines as the day goes on. Cortisol also kind of follows that arc as well, or should. But if we're having blood sugar imbalances, that could actually be impacting that cortisol output. And then we can actually feel more tired during the day, a little bit more wired at night. Maybe you get that second wind close to bedtime, or you're getting that second wind almost in a sense, even at night. So that could also be another sign of some blood sugar imbalances too.
Imagine if you had a better understanding of how your nutrition directly impacted your hormones, your fertility, and your overall health. I hope this interview has offered some insight as to the important role of nutrition in working to improve your health and promote fertility. Don't forget to come back next week for the second part of my discussion with Victoria, where we talk more about nutrient deficiencies, practical steps, gut health testing, and what it looks like to have sustainable nutritional information for any stage of your life. If you're ready to work with our elite team of healthcare professionals, go to our website, radiantclinic.com, to schedule a free discovery call with me and learn more about our package-based pricing for comprehensive care. We are currently able to see people for in-person appointments in our Cedar Rapids, Iowa clinic, or can arrange for a telehealth visit if you live in the states of Iowa, Illinois, or Minnesota. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with someone in your life who would benefit from our services. Remember to subscribe to this podcast for more empowering content that I look forward to sharing with you on our next episode of Cycle Wisdom.